Learning the Parsha of the week, Chassidus on the weekly Torah portion. We're learning the portion of Vayechi, which is the very last portion of the book of Genesis. It's on page 297 in the blue chumash that we're in today. Let's talk about this. Let's do a quick fly through to the Parsha just to get our context, our bearings. We start off, even though the name of the portion is Vayechi, and he lived, the portion begins with a passing of Jacob. And that really talks about the end of his life. Where the beginning, he gets sick. He's the first person in history to get sick. By the way, the reason for that was that until that moment in time, people would never get sick. Can you imagine a world without illness, without doctors, without hospitals? In fact, the way that they just died, the way they died was through sneezing. The same way that the soul entered through and God blew the spirit of life into his nostrils of Adam and Eve, the soul ejected through the nostrils as well. That's the reason why every culture, every society in history around the world, even today, whether you're in Swaziland or in Switzerland, they say some sort of blessing, like they're shocked that you're still alive after you sneeze. Seriously, think about it. You sneeze, for heaven's sake. You never saw somebody sneeze before? Gesundheit. Well, what, I need a prayer now? Like what? Why are we getting so nervous when somebody sneezes? Right? Gesundheit, la briut, asuta, we say in Aramaic. Yisrael could probably help me in Afrikaans. What we say. Do you know any other languages, Joshua? What we say? What? Take care. But like, everybody getting so excited about when somebody sneezes? So what? The reason is because until Jacob passed away, people will die through sneezing. Jacob prayed. He said, listen, God, I've got a lot of kids, a lot of politics over here. One of them's a kid. One of them's a king. I'm sorry. The rest of them have issues. There's a lot of issues here. I need to settle my affairs. So God said, okay, I'll give you a heads up. Introduce the medical profession. Welcome HMO, PPO, and that whole thing, So Jacob is the first one to get sick, which is why at the beginning of this week's Torah portion, there's such a hullabaloo about his illness. And what happens is that from that moment on, somebody sneezed, and they were like, oh my God, he's still alive. The guy's still alive. The guy in the Philippines was sneezing. They were like, hallelujah. They were praying. And they haven't stopped praying ever since, right? So that's the reason why we say a blessing for sneezing. All started with Jacob. Yisrael, how do you say bless you in Afrikaans? Gesundheit. Gesundheit. That's how you say it. I just look at him. I'll get the answer. What? Gesundheit in Yiddish, but in Afrikaans it's Gesundheit.
Oh, okay. Sounds the same.
The health. Yeah, Gesund is health. Right.
And what's supposed to be the response to
Thank you.
learned it.
Oh.
Baruch, yeah.
Ooh. Baruch Tiyeh. Very nice. May you be blessed.
In other words, you give me a blessing.
You too.
Right.
Beautiful. Love it. Okay. Thank you for sharing that. So that's the beginning of the portion. He blesses then Menashe and Ephraim, his two grandsons. These two grandsons were the very first Jews, religious Jews, born in a foreign land, which is the blessing that we bless our children as well. Because you too were born in America, and you should be like Ephraim and Menashe. You should have the courage to go against the current. Then he blesses the 12 tribes. Things get complicated over here. Some of them he doesn't bless at all. Some he blesses a lot. A lot of backstory comes out here about what exactly he knew and what he didn't know regarding Joseph, but that's the majority of the portion. And then we bury Jacob. They bury him in the Holy Land in the city of Hebron, which is the most hotly contested piece of real estate on planet Earth, even though it is documented in the most published book in the history of the world. Isn't that amazing? The most published book in the history of the world, the Bible, is the one that holds the title deed of the Jewish people. Now, if we don't respect our own title deed, how on earth could they respect it as well? So when we come out to the United Nations, we say, well, Israel is ours because of the Holocaust. Israel is ours because of the 6-Day War. Israel is ours because I don't know what, the United Nations vote. Then they say, okay, we voted for you, now we vote against you. But if we have the courage to stand up and say, no, the land is ours because God gave it to us and it's in the Torah, then they'll be like, oh, you actually do believe in yourselves. Oh, so maybe we should believe in you too. Okay, go ahead.
I was asking, when did they bury him?
When did they bury him?
Yeah, I know it was after
he died, but you mean like a year or?
No. Okay, so they brought his bones back, and where is it? I mean, does it say when they buried him?
In history, you mean?
No, in the Torah. Well,
you mean like a date in the calendar or a year?
No, I meant one of the prophets or one of the other.
There's no need for a prophet. It's explicit in the Bible. I'll tell you exactly when it was. I mean,
Yeah,
it was 3,335 years ago is when we came out of Egypt,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
We were there for 210 years. So take 3,350, add 210, minus 17, because he lived there for 17 years, right? So if you add 193 to 3,335, you'll have your answer. That's how many years ago it happened. 3,335 years ago,
was my
plus
question.
193.
Where is it in all our books in Torah?
Here, right here. It's in the Bible, in the 6th Parsha.
But they were in exile at that point.
They were in Egypt. Yeah.
Yeah.
Then they went up to the Holy Land to Hebron, and they came back.
And they brought. Oh, okay, that's what I was.
They came back to Egypt. Yeah.
Oh, okay, that's what.
Which is Then at the very end of the portion, we read about Joseph's death. Joseph actually gives them a code at the very end of the portion. He tells them that listen, guys, it's going to be rough, invoking the covenant of the parts. Now we've learned about this, guys. This is fundamental. The covenant of the parts that we learned in the 3rd portion of the Torah, which was the promise given to Abraham when God says to him, listen, your kids are going to suffer, be persecuted, tortured for 400 years, but then they're going to emerge with great wealth. Right? That was the memo that he was given. So Joseph says, listen, in continuation to that, you're going to stick around here in Egypt for a duration of totality of 400 and something years. And when a Redeemer shows up, how will you know to believe him? When he says, the code was, what was the code? God will surely remember you. That was the code. God will surely remember you. When he gives you that was like the passcode. When he says those words, then you'll know that he's the right guy. And that's exactly what Moses says when he comes from the burning bush. You know what's amazing about YouTube, guys? And welcome to Terry and Corey and Winston and S-Bug from Australia, I think, right? And Winston, if someone sneezes, you can offer him a glass of water. Is that how they do it in Indonesia? Really? Cool. And Lauren, what's amazing about YouTube is that, I don't know how to explain it. Anytime I learn Chassidus, the viewership is 3 times the amount that it is when we learn anything else. It's amazing. I don't know how to explain this. When we learn like Vyodaita, Tan Rabbana, and Tanya, right? We learn that stuff 3 times more viewership than it is here. So I guess that's interesting. All right. Anyway, so now that we've done the fly through, I want to get to the oomph over here. What's the oomph? Let's get into this. So let's go to the very beginning of the portion. Jacob lived in Egypt, page 297. He lived in Egypt for 17 years. The year 2238, since the creation of the world, until 2255. That's it. He lived 17 years. At the end of this period, Jacob's days, i.e. the years of his lifetime, totaled 147 years. Thus, Jacob did not live as long as his grandfather Abraham, who lived 175 years, or his father Isaac, who lived 180 years. You know that within 5 years of your parents' mortality, you're supposed to be concerned about your own. So if your father or mother died at, let's say, age 99, then from the age of 94, you're supposed to be worried. Right? That's how it works, 5 years radius. We learned that from Isaac, when Isaac blessed his sons, Jacob and Esau. That was the reason that he blessed him, because he was getting close to his father's days. Okay, so his mother's days, actually, I'm sorry, he's getting closer to Sarah's days. So when the time drew near for Israel to die, he called for his son Joseph, who was still viceroy of Egypt at that time. What's a viceroy? Is that like a prime minister or something?
Mm-hmm.
Vice. I guess it comes from the word vice, which means second, right? At the time, and thus had the authority to carry his father's last request to come to Goshen. When Joseph arrived, Israel said to him, I found favor in your eye. If I found favor in your eyes, please place your hand under my thigh and swear. We learned about somebody else placing a hand under a thigh. That was Eliezer swearing under the thigh of Abraham, right? Remember, the Torah wasn't given yet. So this was the only object which was holy, that which was under his thigh. Super euphemism here. That because it had a bris on it. A bris was the only command that they had direct from God, right? So by holding the thigh, what he was doing was that he was holding something holy, like swearing over the Torah. And he made him swear that upon my death, you will do me the following act, which is one of genuine kindness. Since I'll be able to neither thank you for it nor repay you for it in this lifetime, please do not bury me in Egypt. For I'm going to soon lie down with my fathers, i.e. die. Interesting expression. Hey, lie down with my fathers. Doesn't say die. Because holy people don't die. They just join their ancestors. And then you must carry me out of Egypt and bury me in their burial place. Joseph replied, I will do as you say. He promised, but he did not swear, for he felt that his promise was sufficient surety. He said, swear to me. I'm not letting you go without a swearing that you'll fulfill my request. So Joseph swore to him. Israel prostrated himself toward the head of the bed. I just want to talk about this a little bit, folks. A quick, interesting midrashic comment here is that why didn't he just swear? Why doesn't he just swear? The reason he needed to swear was because later on, when Joseph wants to bury his father, he goes to Pharaoh and he says to Pharaoh, take a look at verse 311. Page 311, towards the bottom of the page. Joseph asks for permission to bury his dad. Verse number 4, towards the bottom of the page, 311. When the days of weeping for him were over, Joseph, following court protocol, addressed Pharaoh's court, saying, if I found favor in your eyes, please speak to Pharaoh as follows. My father bound me by an oath, saying, I'm about to die in the grave that I purchased at great expense for my brother, and dug for myself in Canaan, where you must bury me. They must bury me. That's in Hebron. From this, you see how important it is for him to be buried there. He expended a large sum to purchase the site, and he dug the grave himself. So allow me now to go up to Canaan, bury my father, and then return. Pharaoh replied, go up to Canaan and bury your father as he had you swear. You see the swear. It seems like the swearing is critical.
Because I think it's because it was an oath that he took, and because it was an oath, Pharaoh honored it. Otherwise, if he said he didn't take an oath from his father.
Why was Pharaoh so concerned about the oath? Good morning, Melissa and Ed. Why was he so concerned about the oath?
Because he didn't want Joseph to break the oath.
Why not? What's wrong with breaking an oath?
He was scared about.
Why was Pharaoh such a big man of his word?
Good question.
So here's the answer. Beautiful answer. It's like this: is that remember Joseph came out of the dungeon last week? No, 2 weeks ago. When he came out of the dungeon, he was a lowly Hebrew. Now the hierarchy in Egypt was that the more languages you knew, the more higher you were in society. So they had this pyramid. This is one of the explanations we have of a pyramid, is that you would stand on the pyramid on the level of your knowledge. So if you knew just one language, you were in the bottom rung. If you knew two, you were one up, right? And so on. So when Joseph comes out of the pit, they were like, okay, let's get to know you. Good. Can you stand in step number 1? You know Egyptian? Good. Next. And he rose up the ranks like this way, right? Now, he was right. What happened was that the night before he came out of the prison, Gabriel, the angel, came to him, taught him all the languages in the world, 17 languages. So now what happens is he's rising the ranks, and everybody's like, oh my God, who's that guy? He's rising the ranks up to Pharaoh. Now, Pharaoh he's at the top. That's why he was the man god, because he was the top of the food chain, right? Top of the pyramid. Problem was that when Joseph reaches Pharaoh, he notices that Pharaoh's only on the 69th rung, because Pharaoh doesn't speak which language? Hebrew. So now Pharaoh's getting good and nervous. See, now nobody knows that Pharaoh's not on the highest rung, because if Joseph overtakes him, then he becomes the Pharaoh. So Pharaoh says, listen, kid, I won't tell if you won't tell, okay? Swear to me right now. Right now, you swear to me. If you know one more language, I won't tell if you won't tell. Make an oath. And he made him swear. So now Joseph is higher than Pharaoh, but nobody knows. Makes an oath. So now Joseph comes and he says, Pharaoh, listen, I got to bury my dad, but so Pharaoh, and just in case Pharaoh's gonna be like, who cares? So what? You bury him here. You think he'll notice, right? And by the way, Jacob was a very holy man. Jacob was the one that ended the famine of 7 years. Remember? You know how he did that?
Yeah.
When Jacob came to Pharaoh in the end of last week's Torah portion, what does he do? He blesses Pharaoh. What does he bless him with? That the river Nile will rise up to him every time he walks. So the Pharaoh loved this, because every he walks, the river irrigates the fields, following him around, right? So the famine was still famine. There was nothing there wasn't rain or anything, right? But Pharaoh was the harbinger of redemption. So the famine ended early. They would have turned Jacob into a deity if he was buried there, which is why Jacob did not want to be buried there. Didn't want to become an idol. So when Joseph says, by the way, he made me swear, which is why the insistence of Jacob, at the beginning of the portion, now we understand. He's like, oh, yeah. Do whatever he made you swear, because we would never want you to break an oath, right? Right. So that was the underlying medrash here about what's going on. But let's go a little. That's in the medrash. It's actually it's a medrash. That's where it comes from. So in fact, it's not a medrash. It's a Gemara. I'm sorry. That's what it is. I forget which Gemara it is, but it's a Gemara. I think it's in. Could it be in Sota? I can't remember right now, but it's in the Gemara. So, cool story. But let's go a little into the deeper, the soul of Torah, the Chassidus of the Parsha, right? Let's explore a little bit deeper what's happening behind the scenes. So, Jacob, let's look at Rashi a moment on page 297. No, it's not Rashi. It's not Rashi. It might be a different medrash. I can't remember which medrash it was, but it says like this. In the opening words, Vayechi, and Jacob lived. It's a very strong word, Vayechi, and he lived. Do you know people that are truly alive? We used to have a teacher in Torah in the yeshiva, Rabbi Wahlberg. He used to ask us, "No, so are you alive today because you're alive, or just because you weren't hit by a truck?" In other words, is it just by default, or are you like living today? You have a reason. Are you passionate about something today, right? So when it says that Vayechi Yaakov and he lived, can you imagine in Egypt? The first 130 years of his life, he was in the Holy Land. And it doesn't say over there that he lived. There he was miserable. In fact, he described to Pharaoh at the end of last week's Torah portion, when Pharaoh asked him how old he was, he said at the beginning of page 291, he says, Jacob replied, I have been a sojourner all my life. The years of my sojourning have been 130. The years of my life have been few and hard, and have not equaled the happiness of the years of my father's lifetimes in the days of their sojourning. In other words, I've been having a miserable life, is what Jacob says. But the last 17 years in Egypt, Vayechi, he's living. The best years of his life is what he lived in the last 17 years in Egypt. In fact, when the Tzemach Tzedek, the third Rebbe, was a young boy, and he learned this pasuk, his teacher told him that Yaakov lived his best years in Egypt, the last 17 years. And that's it's a medrash interpretation of this verse, right? So the Tzemach Tzedek then asked his grandfather, the Alter Rebbe, the author of the Tanya, says, how could it be? How could you live the best years of your life in Egypt? Can you imagine? I mean, it's like, it's kind of like, I mean, Egypt is like the dungeon of the Jewish people. Right? We're celebrating freedom from Egypt, right? It's like saying that the best years of his life he lived in Buchenwald. What? Like, doesn't make sense. Like, what do you mean the best years of his life? How does that even like match? How does it make sense? That's the question that the Tzemach Tzedek, the future third Rebbe, asked his grandfather, the Alter Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe answered him as follows, connected to my sermon this past Shabbos. He said, Egypt was the land of darkness. Agreed, right? We can agree to that. But what Jacob did to that darkness is the reason why it was the best years of his life. Remember what he did before he went down to Egypt? He opened a yeshiva in Egypt, right? That's what he did. On his way down, take a look. Last week's Torah portion. I don't have time to find it right now. The Harbinger of Redemption. Okay, so oh, no, here it is. Here. Where does it say that he sent Yehuda to open up a yeshiva? Here, bottom of page 287. Before Jacob comes down to Egypt, here's what he says. He had sent Judah ahead of him to Joseph. Bottom of 287, right? To make advanced preparations in Goshen. Chief amongst the preparations was setting up an academy for the study of Torah to which Jacob's family would be able to turn for instructions in God's ways. They then arrived in Goshen. Very, very important verse. Before Jacob arrives in Egypt, there's already a yeshiva there. The previous Rebbe did the same thing. Good morning, El and Phyllis. Before Jacob, the Alter Rebbe, before the Frierdiker Rebbe, the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe arrived in America, he also made sure to open a yeshiva here in the United States of America, because the way that Jacob entered Egypt was not Egypt controlling him, but him controlling Egypt. There's actually an amazing Mishnah in Ethics of the Fathers. There's an amazing Mishnah. I got to read it to you. Ethics of the Fathers. It makes no sense. This Mishnah reads as follows. This is super cool, guys. Super cool stuff. And listen, feel free to sit down. No extra charge. Okay, so the Mishnah says as follows. It's a story. Here it is. It's on page 295 in the prayer book if you ever want to find the story. It goes like this. Rabbi Yosef ben Kisma said, it's a rabbi. He was a rabbi. He was running away from Rome. He said, once I was walking on the road. You got to hear the story, folks. Just connect to the story. Rabbi Yosef ben Kisma said, once I was walking on the road when a certain man met me. Jan, this is a Mishnah and Ethics of the Fathers I'm explaining now, okay? To put Jacob into the right context and understand why the best years of his life were in Egypt. So Rabbi Yosef ben Kisma said, once I was walking along the road when a certain man met me. He greeted me shalom, and I returned his greeting shalom. He said to me, Rabbi, from what place are you? I said to him, I'm from a great place of a great city of scholars and sages. He said to me, Rabbi, if you would be living to live with us in our place, I would give you 1,000,000 golden dinars, precious stones, and pearls. Now, what would you respond if somebody made you that offer?
Okay.
I mean, sounds to me like ready to roll.
Mm-hmm.
Like we can buy a property, we can build an amazing Chabad house, we won't have to worry about fundraising. This is like unbelievable. But Rabbi Yosef ben Kisma turns out to be the worst Chabad rabbi in the history of the universe. Here's what he answers. He says, I replied, even if you were to give me all the silver and gold, precious stones and pearls in the world, I would dwell nowhere but in a place of Torah. Sorry, Charlie, no deal, right? And so it is written in the book of Psalms by David, king of Israel, the Torah of your mouth is more precious to me than thousands of gold and silver pieces. By the way, if you go into the next class, just you should know that this is not the end of the story, okay?
Good.
Rabbi Yosef ben Kisma was a good, awesome guy, and I'll explain later, but just I don't want to leave you on that cliffhanger, okay? And so it is written in the book of Psalms by David, king of Israel, the Torah of your mouth is more precious to me than thousands of gold and silver pieces. Furthermore, at the time of a man's passing from the world, neither silver nor gold, nor precious stones, nor pearls accompany him, but only Torah learning and good deeds. And it is stated, I mean, he is on a roll. When you walk the Torah shall guide you. When you lie down, it will watch over you. When you wake, it shall speak for you. When you walk, it shall guide you in this world. When you lie down, it shall watch over you in the grave. When you awake, it shall speak for you in the world to come. And it also says, mine is the silver, mine is the gold, says the Lord of hosts. Huh, what a speech. Dude, he asked you a question, yes or no, and you had to give him this whole speech, right? So what's going on over here, right? It makes no sense why Rabbi Yosef ben Kisma would say no. And if you analyze the Mishnah, you look closely, did he really say no? Look what he said. He said, would you come and live with us, right, Rabbi? If you would be willing to live with us in our place, I would give you 1,000,000 golden dinars, precious stones, and pearls, right? That was the question. I replied, even if you were to give me all the silver and gold, precious stones, and pearls in the world, I would dwell nowhere but in the place of Torah. Did he say no or yes?
Want to do it without the money.
No, he said, what's the last part? I will not.
I will not dwell anywhere. I will dwell nowhere but in a place of Torah.
Well, so he's telling him you have to build a yeshiva and I'll be there.
But that's what the guy offered him.
But he was testing him, I think.
Okay, so here's how I saw a beautiful explanation. I believe it's from the Rabbi. I don't remember exactly, but I believe it's from the Rabbi. Look at the question. There was one unnecessary word in the question, which betrayed the true intent of the question. Rabbi, tell me which word is unnecessary here. Ready? In the question. Rabbi, if you would be willing to live with us in our place, I would give you 1,000,000 golden dinars, precious stones, and pearls. Bim komenu. What do you mean? If you live with us, where else are you going to live with us? In our place means on our terms. This is how we do stuff. Don't bring me your Jewish stuff. You be the rabbi, but don't tell us how to live our lives. We're very comfortable in our place. You come to our place. We're not coming to yours. Bim komenu. That was the question, right? In other words, would you be willing to be our token religious Jew, and you'll live with us in our place so we can clear our conscience because you'll pray for all of us, right? What does he answer? He says, yes, I'm coming, but not in your place. I'm going to transform your place. You're not going to dictate the rules. That's what the answer was. I replied, even if you would give me all the silver and gold, precious stones and pearls in the world, don't wave your checkbook at me, okay? I would dwell nowhere but in a place of Torah. I'm coming and I'm bringing the Torah with me.
Yeah, that sounds right.
You see the difference? That's Jacob coming down to Egypt. This is what Jacob does. What does he do? It's an amazing Mishnah. It's like you read the Mishnah and you're like, I don't know what's wrong with this rabbi. It seems like he's just off, right? But when you read the story, you realize the whole speech he gives him over there is like, listen, Torah, you don't mess with Torah. Torah is not an elective. It's not an accessory. It's not an extracurricular activity for seniors that are tired of golf and mahjong. Okay, it's our life. Kiheim chayenu. It is our lives. We breathe, live, eat, and drink Torah. It changes us, not that we dictate the Torah, right? So Jacob does the same thing coming down to Egypt. He opens the yeshiva before he even gets there, because the yeshiva transforms the place instead of the place transforming Jacob. By the time he gets there, he's already master of the place, right? And we spoke about this in the sermon on Shabbos. What I said in brief was that why is it that out of 210 years in Egypt, only the last 86 years were slavery? The answer is because as long as the Jews were toiling in the study of Torah until the passing of Levi, the youngest of the last of the 12 tribes to pass, they were toiling in something. And they didn't need to toil in persecution. They were toiling in Torah. That's good enough. So as long as Torah is there, you transform the place. And that is the Egypt in which Jacob lived the 17 best years of his life. You see, Jacob, let's say this, the first 130 years of his life were years of light, right? The last 17 years of his life, he was in a place of darkness, right? Now, if you had to compare the light and the dark, of course, the light would be preferable over the dark. You'd say the first 130 years in the Holy Land should have been better than the last 17 years in Egypt. But what he did in Egypt was not just dark, he was actually transforming the darkness. That's what he was doing. Let's look at the examples of how he transformed the darkness. Egypt, we just said, he transformed it into a place of Torah study, right? So it's one thing to live in the Holy Land, but how about making Egypt holy? That's even better, right? It's like saying you can light a candle in the daytime, but it's kind of useless. But if you light a candle in the nighttime, it's more meaningful.
That's why we like the Hanukkah candles
That's
at night.
all connected to the Hanukkah discourse we just finished, right? It's all connected about the importance of transforming the night as opposed to just illuminating the day, which is almost unnecessary, right? That was the first transformation. The second thing is Joseph. Joseph is one also, because here he was, why is Joseph even alive? Right? When it's an amazing thing that happens here. Just I want you to look at something else here. When Jacob finds out that Joseph is alive, an amazing way that this happens.
Now I see your face.
Even before that, I want you to notice something very cool. How they broke the news to Joseph, to Jacob. I mean,
The sun set to it.
who did?
And they came back from Egypt and told them that Joseph was still alive.
Here it is. Go to page 285. Okay, they went up at the second verse, 285. They went up from Egypt and they came to their father Jacob in Canaan. They told him Joseph is still alive. How did they do that? It was the granddaughter, Sarah, daughter of Asher, who was playing the harp, and she broke it to him very slowly in song. Right? So she broke to gently the news so he didn't have a heart attack, God forbid. They told him Joseph was still alive, and he was the ruler of all of Egypt. But he disregarded them, for he did not believe them. They told him everything that Joseph had told them, including what topic he and Joseph had been studying when they last parted, which was the laws of the calf that must be decapitated in order to atone for an unsolved murder. Okay,
Ooh.
so that's a special law in Torah. It's the law of the decapitated calf. What? Without getting technical, it's the law of the decapitated calf, right? Jacob saw the wagons Joseph sent to transport him, understanding that in sending them, Joseph was alluding to the topic of the last Torah study session together. Since the word wagon, agala, is the same word for calf, egel. It was a code. Finally convinced of the veracity of their words, he believed them, and the divine spirit came alive once again in their father Jacob. Israel said, I'm blessed with much joy for my son Joseph is still alive. Let me go and see him before I die. So there's two stages of revelation. Right? In the beginning, if you in the Hebrew, in the verse 26, it says, and they told him, Od Yosef Chai, Joseph is alive. But when he heard the story of when he saw the wagons, which Joseph insisted on sending him, the wagons being a code to the last Torah study session, which was the same word, then he says, Od Yosef Beni Chai, in the verse 28. Not only did he say, is Joseph alive, he says, Joseph, my son, is alive. Because you realize it's one thing for Joseph to be physically alive, that's great. But if Joseph is alive as my son, as a Jew, wow, he's still learning Torah. Now his spirit returned, right? And that's what the transformation of Egypt is. In the Holy Land, there's light. In the land of Egypt, there's dark. To see that Joseph experienced such darkness, such tumultuous trials, and still he emerged as an observant Torah Jew, that is transformation. That's why the best years of his life, he lived in Egypt. You see that? So we've got two transformations here. Number one is Egypt being transformed into a place of Torah. The second one is that he sees that his son is Joseph is a Torah observant Jew, and of course Manasseh and Ephraim, Torah observant grandchildren. Okay. Right, and that obviously connects very beautifully to the theme of what we learned in Hanukkah. Right, the Hanukkah lights is about transforming, igniting the night. When you light in the evening, even though it's based on the candles of the menorah in the temple, which were lit in the daytime, because the degree of revelation of godliness that we were able to access and to draw down to this earth during temple times was the kind of light that can only be drawn in the daytime. But in the exile, when we go into exile and we're suffering from the Greeks, now we find that hidden oil within us. We draw such deeper resources within ourselves to draw deeper godliness from above, where the power of godliness is such that it can transform the night. It illuminates the evening, and that's why we light the Hanukkah candles in the evening. And that's this major theme that goes through the entire Torah of the good times are good, but the bad times are better.
Mhm.
That's why it says, just one last point, is that it says that when God created man, it says, every day of creation, it says, and he saw that it was good, right? But when he saw that he created man, an amazing, amazing expression that God says, and he says, and behold, it was very good. It wasn't just good, it was very good. You got to see this in the verse, page 16. No, earlier. Here, page 11. Here, page 11, verse 31. You can read it in the Hebrew, it's like any complicated. Verse 30, page 10, verse 31. After he created man, he saw everything that he created. V'hinei tov me'od, and behold, it was very good. V'hinei tov me'od, and behold, it was very good. What does that mean? And it was very good.
Well, if you
What?
Well, in the English, it says,
Yeah.
it was not only good, very good, for only humanity is capable of bringing creation to its fruition and purpose.
The Medrash says like this: Tov means man. He saw that the good inclination is good, but when he saw the evil inclination, he said, "Very good."
Oh,
That's what the Medrash says. The good inclination, that's good, but the evil inclination, that's very good.
really?
That's what the Medrash says, because
of free will.
Because our ability to use our free will to transform the negative into a positive, to transform the anti-Semite into a pro-Semite, to transform dysfunction into function, which is a major theme of Tanya, of why God gives you dysfunctional situations in your life, so that you can transform them to good. That's the purpose. That's what God wanted. So if your life is messed up, that's the way it's meant to be, because that's what God wants from you. And that's why Jacob lived the best years of his life in Egypt. Awesome, guys. Thank you very much. Terry, I'm glad that you appreciated that Mishnah. That always bothered you. Hopefully put it to rest now. Great. Awesome, guys. Have a lovely day, everybody. Shalom and be well. By the way, tomorrow there is no YouTube stream. We're having a live bring in here over breakfast during the morning Torah study. Thank you.
Question.